What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with Tech Daily, and in this video, we're going to be comparing the 4 new iPhone 14s. Now, Apple's iPhone lineup this year is actually pretty straightforward. We have 2 regular iPhones and 2 Pro iPhones. There are a number of differences, features, capabilities, etc. between the regular iPhones and the Pro iPhones. We know this, that's been the case each year, and I'm going to go over everything with that so you can decide if going Pro is worth it for you. But what's sort of interesting is, unlike previous years, there's no difference between the regular 14 and larger 14 Plus, and no difference between the regular 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, aside from the screen sizes. The bigger devices give you no extra features, no extra storage, no nothing, aside from just being bigger. You may get a bit better battery life with the bigger phones, since there is a bigger battery inside them. That really depends on your usage. So keep that in mind. If you're going for a Plus or a Pro Max, the only thing you're really paying for is a bigger display. Now let's actually touch on price first, since that is where you'll likely start in comparing these phones, and iPhones now have gotten more expensive than ever. The cheapest iPhone in the lineup this year is the regular iPhone 14, and it starts at $799 for 128 gigabytes of storage. The larger iPhone 14 Plus sells for $100 more, $899 for 128 gigabytes of storage, and jumping up to the Pros, the regular sized 14 Pro is $1,000 for 128 gigs, and the top of the line 14 Pro Max is nearly $1,100 for, yet again, 128 gigabytes of storage. So this year, the entry-level iPhone 14 is quite a bit more pricey than previous entry-level iPhones like the XR or the iPhone 11. And in case it wasn't obvious, Apple dropped the mini iPhone from the lineup completely. There's no smaller, cheaper iPhone 14 mini. Now, yes, you can still buy previous generation iPhones, including the 13 mini or the 12 or even the iPhone SE. But we're focusing on this year's new iPhone 14 lineup. And with that, you're paying a pretty penny. While we're certainly not getting a discount on these new iPhones, you can save a good chunk of money on your wireless bill by switching to Tello, who were kind enough to sponsor this video. Tello offers affordable and fully customizable phone plans, so you pay for exactly what you need only when you need it. Tello offers unlimited data plans starting at just $29 a month, which, by the way, is cheaper than ever. They just lowered their prices. Tello delivers 4G LTE and 5G coverage nationwide, so you get the same great coverage as one of those big wireless companies at a fraction of the cost. You also get free hotspot and Wi-Fi calling and international calls to more than 60 countries. There's no fees, no commitments. You can cancel at any time or make adjustments on the go. Mix and match the data and minutes to your liking. Even pay as low as $5 a month. And best of all, Tello makes it simple to bring your current phone on over. Most GSM or unlocked devices are eligible. You can check their website to see if your device will work. Tello is one of the most flexible and affordable phone plans out there, and they're highly rated by their current customers. Create your custom plan and see how much you can save at Tello.com, or click the link below in the video description. And thanks so much again to Tello for sponsoring this video. So consistency is the theme with the iPhones this year, and I think that's pretty obvious with the size and design. The regular iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Pro are both 6.1-inch devices, and the 14 Plus and 14 Pro Max are both 6.7-inch phones. They're all the same basic design and form factor, and from the front at least, there's really only one thing that sets them apart: the notch. On the 14 Pros, Apple redesigned the notch completely. It's now a cutout of sorts for the selfie camera and the Face ID sensors, and on top of that, it's also a feature, I guess you could say. It's what Apple calls the dynamic island. Basically, a little area at the top of the screen that will present you with little widgets from different apps currently in use. So for example, if you set a timer or play some music or a video, you'll see that information in the dynamic island, and you can also tap to bring up the app controls. It'll display a couple of apps at a time, and the dynamic island is also basically your notifications pop-up area now too. It's certainly an interesting take on the notch. I've personally found it more useful than I initially thought I would, and as weird as it sounds, it is a major difference in design and functionality between the regular iPhone 14s and the 14 Pros. The regular iPhone 14s don't have any dynamic island functionality or any other changes to that iconic notch. Around back, aside from the color options, another big difference between the regular iPhones and the Pros is the build material. As we've had in years past, the regular iPhones are a glossy glass paired with a matte aluminum frame. The Pros are a frosted glass with a polished stainless steel build, and not only do the Pros look nicer in my opinion, they also literally feel more premium in the hand. hand. They're heavier, noticeably so, than the regular iPhone 14s. Actually, this I think is an unintended win for the iPhone 14 Plus. It's a big phone for sure, but it's not nearly as heavy as the Pro Max, so it's much easier to hold and handle. Everything else though, physically, with all the iPhones is the same as it's always been. Same volume buttons and silent switch, same power buttons, same lightning port and speaker setup. Obviously though, the other major physical difference is the camera setup, so let's get into that. Year over year, the camera capabilities have pretty much been the main differentiating factor between the regular iPhones and the Pro iPhones, and that's once again the case with the iPhone 14s. Now, I want to reiterate, between the regular iPhone 14 and the 14 Plus, there is no difference. And this year, between the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max, there's also no difference. That wasn't always the case. But between the regular iPhone 14s and the Pros, there are a number of differences. The main lens, for starters, on the regular iPhone 14s is a new 12 megapixel f1.5 aperture shooter, but the Pro iPhones also get a new main camera. It's a 48 megapixel f1.8 aperture lens. The regular iPhone 14s have a secondary ultra-wide lens, of course, as well. The Pros do too, but it seems to be a slightly different and better ultra-wide lens based on some of the more in-depth technical specs. The Pros, of course, also have a third camera lens that the regular iPhone 14s don't have. A 12 megapixel telephoto lens with up to 3 times optical zoom and macro capabilities. By the way, to my knowledge, the selfie cameras on all the phones seem to be about the same, but correct me if I'm wrong there. I just haven't found any info that says otherwise. Now, in general, the iPhone 14 Pros are going to offer a number of capabilities and shooting modes you won't get on the regular iPhone 14s, and a lot of that stems from the third telephoto lens. For example, the Pros offer optical zoom, using the actual lens itself for better picture and video quality for the 2x and 3x zoom levels. You also get digital zoom up to 15 times, so if you're zooming in a lot on your subjects, the Pros have the advantage there. The Pros also utilize the telephoto lens for additional portrait picture shooting modes, and the Pros have a dedicated and automatic macro mode. So really, you're getting a half a dozen more capabilities just from the third lens alone on the Pros. The main lens on the Pros also unlocks some additional capabilities, like Apple ProRAW and 48 megapixel resolution images, as well as Apple ProRes for video. Now, these capabilities and shooting modes are one thing, but the real difference between the Pros and the regular iPhones is in the actual results. Pro iPhones are going to capture better, brighter, more detailed pictures overall, but especially in dimly lit and nighttime scenes. When you pinch on in, you can really see that difference. The regular iPhone 14s do have improved cameras as well compared to last year at least. They're better in their own right when it comes to detail and low light, but the Pros are still better overall. And jumping from the regular iPhone to the Pro iPhones, this I think is a majority of what you're paying for. You just have to decide if this is something that's worth it for you. Another big difference between the regular iPhones and the Pros is the display. Now, what's sort of interesting is that with the iPhone 14 lineup, much of the core screen specs are actually the same across the 4 phones. They all have Apple's super nice Super Retina XDR OLED panel with HDR10 support. They're bold and colorful. They all look great. Resolution-wise, all 4 phones are also fairly consistent. They all pack in about 460 pixels per inch, and that's important to mention only because usually bigger phones have the same resolution as their smaller counterparts, but that's not the same here. Apple crammed in a bit more pixels for the bigger phones so that they're just as sharp as the smaller ones. Up close, you aren't going to pick out any pixels anywhere with these phones. The 2 main differences in the displays though between the regular and the Pro is with the brightness and the refresh rate. The Pro iPhones have a much brighter display at baseline, 1000 nits versus 800 on the regular, but their max auto brightness in like outdoor conditions, for example, is also way brighter, up to 2000 nits versus 1200 on the regular. And that is a big difference. On top of that, the iPhone 14 Pros also have Apple's ProMotion variable refresh rate screen, a silky smooth feel with your taps, touches, swipes, and scrolls, where the phone will automatically flip between low and high refresh rates. The regular iPhone 14s don't have that. They're 60 Hz screens, and while it may be tough to tell on camera here, the touches and swipes just aren't as smooth. Honestly though, unlike years past, the fact that all the iPhones at least have similar XDR OLED screens and the same resolutions means that most people will be pretty happy in just sticking with the regular iPhone 14s. I personally do value the silky smooth feel of ProMotion myself, so that's why I opt for an iPhone 14 Pro, but Apple has made the screens on their iPhone lineups now more similar than ever. There is one other screen difference though I should mention. The iPhone 14 Pros have the option to enable and always-on display. The regular 14s don't have this option. And this allows you to have your iPhone screen on, though very dimly lit, at all times, so you can see the clock, your widgets, your notifications, or whatever else that pops up. Now, lots of other smartphones have had this feature for a while, but it's a first for the iPhone, and you can turn it off if you want. I personally don't even think this is much of a feature or a selling point, but nonetheless, it is something you get with the iPhone 14 Pros that you wouldn't get with any other iPhone. When it comes to the out loud listening experience, all four phones seem to have the same dual speaker setup. I'm not aware of any differences in hardware or anything else, and to me, they all sound the same. Perhaps the most surprising difference between the regular iPhones and the Pro iPhones this year is with the internal specs. For the first time ever, Apple did not give the regular iPhone a new processor. 14 and 14 Plus are powered by last year's A15 Bionic chipset, while the Pro and Pro Max received Apple's new A16 Bionic. On top of that, all four iPhones actually have the same 6 gigs of RAM inside as well. Now, while it's a shame the new regular iPhone 14s didn't get outright upgraded, the chipset was refreshed, so it's technically a little better. But I will say that iPhones for the last few years have just been plenty fast, and I just don't know that most people experience noticeable or extreme bumps up in performance year over year with their average everyday usage. Sure, if you're coming from an iPhone 11, any one of these new phones will feel faster, but from the regular iPhone 13 or the 13 Pros from last year, neither the regular iPhone 14 or the 14 Pros, even with their upgraded processors, will yield you a huge performance boost. But that's okay. The real reason to opt for a new iPhone isn't necessarily for the performance upgrades, but for the longevity. Buying an iPhone 14 now means you'll probably get 7 or 8 years at least of major iOS updates, so it may just be the last new iPhone you get for a while. Finally, when it comes to battery life, like I mentioned at the start, the bigger iPhones do get a bigger sized battery inside. So theoretically, the 14 Plus and 14 Pro Max could get better battery life than the regular 14 and 14 Pro. But this varies based on individual usage. In general, the battery capacities on the bigger iPhones are larger, about 3,300 milliamps for the 6.1-inch phones and about 4,300 milliamps on the 6.7-inch iPhones, but they also have larger screens that need to be powered. From what I've seen in my own usage and from other people's battery tests, the bigger phones tend to yield an extra 15 to 20% of juice after the smaller iPhones run out, which sure, could be very helpful during the day, but it's not like you're getting twice the life out of it. And to be totally honest, I'm hesitant to call that a reason to buy one of the bigger sized iPhones over the smaller sized ones, but to each their own. Some folks swear by the battery life in the Plus and Pro Max devices. Overall, Apple's iPhone lineup this year seems to be closer than ever when it comes to what you get on a regular iPhone versus a Pro iPhone. The sizes are consistent at least, and with the Pros, you still get a nicer build, Pro Motion display, way more camera capabilities, and technically a better processor, though that's debatable. Is that stuff reason enough to spend an extra couple $100s? Is it worth it to spend more on a bigger sized iPhone? I would personally say no to both of those questions, but what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.